Great. Thanks, Kimberly. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to our 2025 Town Hall. This is something we do every year and is part of the way that we hold ourselves accountable to our community. Let me briefly introduce the cast of characters you'll be hearing from today. My colleagues, Tom Demeranville, our product director, Julie Petro, director of communications, Paloma Marin Areza, associate director of engagement, Will Simpson, director of technology, Tommy Tepper, director of finance and operations, and last but not least, Stephanie Harley, director of staff and board engagement. So the good news is you won't be hearing very much from me today, but I will talk a little bit just to get us kicked off, a reminder of what we're all about at ORCID. And then my colleagues will talk us through each one of our 5 strategic themes. Finally, Steph will give an update on our governance, and we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So please do, if you have questions, type them into the Q&A box in Zoom, and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end. So briefly, an update of ORCID. I expect you all know this if you're on this call, but just as a reminder, we provide 3 main services at ORCID. The ORCID ID itself, the unique persistent identifier, which is available free of charge to researchers around the world. The ORCID record, or the CV, or the profile, which is connected to the ID and includes all kinds of scholarly profile metadata, employment, education, funding, peer review activities, various kinds of research outputs, and other metadata. Last but not least, a set of APIs, application programming interfaces, that allow other systems to connect to the ORCID data. And as you'll see in a slide or two, next slide, in fact, those are extensively used and enable all of that data and those identifiers to move around the scholarly systems ecosystem and be reused. So an update on adoption of ORCID. These are pretty big numbers. We focus these days on active researchers. So these are people who have used their ORCID records in the last year. We have 9.4 million of those when we checked at the end of March, and they are in 250 countries, which is every country on the ISO country code list. We're a member organization, so we're supported by our membership, and the support of our members enable us to keep the ORCID service free for researchers. We currently have a little over 1,400 organizational members, again, well distributed around the world. We have member organizations in 62 countries, and 28 of those countries have national ORCID consortia, which often the way that universities join ORCID, and there's one regional consortium in Latin America. And then coming back to those APIs, we are getting very close to 6,000 different systems which are integrated with those APIs. I think is really remarkable. Those are the ones we know about. There are more that use our anonymous APIs. And I think that really is a testament to how embedded ORCID is into this scholarly information ecosystem and how useful the data is. Little bits on how we're doing from a sustainability point of view. We have been financially sustainable since 2019. So 2024 was our 6th year of generating a modest operating surplus. And that's very important for a sustainability point of view, making sure that we can really deliver on the persistence in PIDs and make sure that our identifiers are around for the long term. And later on, Tommy will talk about how that's enabled us to build up a financial reserve fund. The vast majority of our revenue comes from membership fees. So a little bit of interest and investment income on our reserves, but over 95% of the revenue comes from membership fees. And we saw healthy growth in membership last year. Of course, we also saw growth in our expenses with inflation, salary increases, etc. So the rest of this presentation, I will hand over to my colleagues. We're going to be talking about our 5 strategic themes from our current strategic plan. That current strategic plan is coming to the end of its planning period. This year, 2025, will be the last year. So we will be working this year on preparing the next strategic plan. But both in 2024 and for the remainder of this year, these 5 themes guided all our work. And we're going to start off with Tom, who's going to be talking about increasing value to research. So Tom, over to you.
Great, thanks, Chris. So yeah, I'll be talking about researchers and specifically increasing value to researchers, and I'll be talking about the things we've done over the past year or so in 2024 and the things we're hoping to achieve this year. I'm going to start with a few stats. So just following on from what Chris was talking about with 5,957 now, in fact, ORCID integrated systems. But this actually translates into a benefit really for our researchers, and researchers at the center of everything we do. They signed in 80 billion times last year into those systems, which saves them a lot of time. It's more convenient. They don't have to remember lots and lots of passwords for all these different systems. So the fact that we have these integrations and they're working with us really does help researchers out. Similarly, we had 646 members update 2.8 million ORCID records, and they added between them 25 million items. So that's an awful lot of works, funding, education, employment information that is now moving around the ecosystem. And the flip side of that, of all this effort that goes into updating these records, we serviced 2.2 billion API read requests and 300 million page views last year. And this really is the count of how much value people are getting out of the data that they're reusing. And a lot of this will be by researchers themselves. When page views, they'll be looking up authors when they're linked to from publications and manuscripts and things like that, and also be pulling their metadata around the system automatically. And this has happened, like I said, 2.2 billion times. So we're quite proud of being able to support that number of requests with our infrastructure. We maintain a pretty high level of user satisfaction. In fact, I wouldn't say pretty high. The first number here is Net Promoter Score, and of 55. Now, if you're not familiar with Net Promoter Score, a Net Promoter Score of 50 or above is considered excellent. Anything over 0 is good. So 55 is considered absolutely excellent, and we're really, really proud of this. These metrics do remain fairly constant year on year, but it's nice to know that our researchers are reasonably satisfied with what we're doing, and that we're heading in the right direction. So in terms of things that we added for researchers last year, one of the main ones was around work types and the expansion of our work type vocabulary. We worked pretty hard with our advisory committee, the ORCID Researcher Advisory Committee, to be specific, to identify the missing work items and help categorize them in a way that makes sense to researchers, not just people who are used to cataloging things. We identified an entire new class of outputs that researchers would like to include in their ORCID record, dissemination. And we also mapped it to an existing vocabulary so that we can benefit from all the hard work that the Coalition of Open Access Repositories have put into maintaining and developing a vocabulary, and also the translations they've got there. This has been really well received, especially dissemination category. And the most popular new type, in fact, is public speech, which is great to see. One of the other major things we did was to enable researchers to share their email domains, and specifically their institutional email domains or the professional email domains. Research integrity continues to be a hot topic for our members, and researchers would like to be able to add trust to their records so that people can be confident in what they have on their ORCID records. And email domains are one way of doing this. We put this in place last September, and since then we've seen roughly 80,000 researchers a week enable this functionality, and we're up to over 1.5 million researchers sharing their verified and validated email domains. This is fantastic, I think. It's one of the only ways researchers can proactively get a green tick on their record, and we can see people taking advantage of it already. This is backed by an awful lot of work that we did with RAW, the Research Organization Registry. where we processed all the website information in there and calculated domains. So this is an ongoing process, but yeah, it's really been a bit of teamwork between ourselves and Raw to get this far. It's now, in fact, easier, again, talking of Raw, for researchers to add affiliations. We started prompting researchers last year based on their email domain to add affiliations, but we continue to work through the year iterating on our improvements. We improved the touch points with researchers, we improved our mappings, and as a result of this, 3 times as many affiliations were added by researchers to the registry in 2024 than 2023. So we're seeing a big growth in affiliation metadata in the registry, which again is fantastic for everyone. One of the other things that really drove that was making it possible for researchers to find their affiliations in the languages they're most familiar with, or with the acronyms that they actually use in their day-to-day life. We incorporated all the raw name variants into our user interface. And yeah, we now see 73,000 different raw organizations in the user interface. And you can do things like, for example, find the University of Vienna in German, English, Hungarian, Croatian, and Slovenian now. And this is similar for an awful lot of universities. And this is driven by changes to the raw metadata. So now we have a way for organizations to improve their own discoverability within the ORCID registry, is to update the metadata that's held for them in the raw registry. And these things now move between them. And finally, we help researchers get the support they need. We have a small but mighty support team, and they do service an awful lot of requests, 50,000 a year to be exact. Well, not to be exact, to be rough. But yeah, 50,000 a year. And they maintain a really impressive 94% satisfaction rate. And I'm personally very, very proud that we still have a team where a researcher who is having trouble achieving their goals can actually talk to a human being at the other end and get a human being helping them out. Not all services can say the same. In fact, I think this is decreasing over time, and I think it really is a testament to how much we take seriously the concept of researchers being at the center of ORCID's mission. So on to what we're going to be doing next year, well, this year. We've already started many of these activities, but we are going to help researchers share a wider range of their own activities on their ORCID records. We hear a lot that researchers want to be thought of as more than just metrics. They're not just publication metadata attached to a number or a name. And we've already started this work with the work types, with things like public speech and other types like music and things like this. So yeah, we're going to continue down that road and enable researchers to share more context with the works they're doing as well. We want to help researchers organize their records. This is, again, a very common piece of feedback from researchers, is the ability to really present their work and their impact in a more meaningful way to them. And also giving viewers of ORCID records a way of consuming that data in a way that makes sense to them as well. So there's a balance there to be had, and this is something we're working on right now. And finally, for researchers there, we really want to continue our drive to improve the automation around suggestions and other mechanisms of connecting researchers with other systems. And in fact, I'll be talking to our consortiums tomorrow about some of the things that we've got in the works there. We're also going to build new channels to engage with users. Researchers do like to understand what's going on, and it'd be nice if we had a better way of communicating with them on those topics. And we're going to continue to increase our strategic partnerships with key services. We saw a few come on last year in the areas of software, but we want to keep banging the ORCID drum and getting the services on board with the ORCID ecosystem that the researchers actually would like to interact with the most. And that's an ongoing challenge, and we continue to do it. So with that rounded up, I'm going to hand over to Julie, who's going to talk to you about increasing value to members.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining us today. The ability to access data about researchers and their research has always been one of ORCID's most attractive value propositions, both to researchers and organizations. But a bigger challenge that we have faced is how to convince organizations that in order to reap the value of getting data from ORCID, they have to also commit to contributing the data that they have about the researchers they fund, publish, or employ so that they can benefit and everybody else can benefit too. So I'm going to be talking about this strategic priority, which is increasing value to members. And it's about how we help our members do exactly this, rather than simply turning on their member API once they've become a member and expecting them to integrate their systems with our registry with little help from us, because we appreciate it's a huge undertaking to garner the internal support necessary for this kind of development project. Not to mention all the outreach efforts to encourage user adoption after the fact. And what we've heard from many in our community is that even though they love ORCID themselves and their colleagues love ORCID, it can be difficult to craft a really compelling business case to convince their administration to commit the time and resources. But what we realized is that ORCID has a part to play in helping address the crisis of research integrity, and everybody is concerned about this. So in 2024, we started sharing messaging and imagery about trust markers, as well as the idea that our member organizations, because they add trust markers to ORCID records via their validated integrations and the data that they add, form what we call our community trust network. And we launched this messaging and these concepts with a webinar last May that has so far been rewatched over 23,000 times. So we feel pretty confident that the message is getting out there, and we keep seeing it pop up throughout the community in different presentations from other organizations, different people talking about trust markers and things like this. And the message is that over time, as more and more ORCID members contribute data about their researchers or authors, the more saturated the scholarly record becomes with that data and the accompanying trust markers. And also this message about how this data and its trust markers that is being reused and reshared, as Tom just mentioned, 2.2 billion times in 2024 throughout the scholarly ecosystem strengthens it overall, all while reducing researchers' efforts. And we all know that researchers would rather be conducting their research rather than managing the outputs that come from that research. And this message, we're happy to say, it relates directly to our original mission that we've always had to enable transparent and trustworthy connections between researchers, their contributions, and their affiliations as they engage in their work. But even as we do find this trust markers language popping up more and more, we want to remind people that we apply trust mechanisms to all data in the registry, not just the data contributed by members. Our terms of use, for example, specifically prohibits misrepresentation, and that gives us recourse to act when any record is disputed by anyone in the community through our dispute procedures. We also have a machine learning algorithm that detects spam, and disputed records are removed from use pending correction or withdrawal. And it's important to remember that no matter how many trust markers there are or ever will be in ORCID records, there will also always be self-asserted data there too. And perfectly good reasons why a researcher might self-assert. Perhaps the organization that they're affiliated with doesn't contribute data yet, or doesn't exist in the same form anymore, or they may be recording another kind of historical output. And what's important also to remember is that trust markers clarify the data's provenance metadata, which is metadata that we've always collected. But the trust markers just make it easier for consumers of that data to visualize it very quickly and easily and decide for themselves if it meets the requirements for their use case. And we do this because we're not just interested in reducing researchers' efforts. When embedded in integrity check workflows, trust markers might make it easier for a reviewer to assess a researcher's scholarly bona fides by giving them a way to prioritize the list of things they might have to verify, or by reducing those items altogether. Which brings me to another significant activity in 2024. We released an expandable record summary view at the top of each ORCID record. So when expanded, the viewer can see a summary of the provenance data and the trust markers found inside that record, as well as when that record was created and last updated. So now we have these record summaries that can be embedded in the review process that I mentioned in the previous slide that we've launched in 2023, or we now have record summaries accessible right from the record itself. And our outreach materials with Community Trust Network and Trust Marker messaging is available for free in our brand library for anybody to use. We publish everything under a CC0 license. We have a slide deck that can be used and customized to fit any kind of presentation needs that you might have internally with internal stakeholders or in your community. We have flyers and graphics and other useful things that you can use that can help you promote ORCID adoption at your organization or just share these concepts among your colleagues. But of course, the easiest way for an organization to rapidly gain value from their ORCID membership is simply to turn on a pre-built integration in a system that they already use. So whether that's one of the popular open source scholarly infrastructure platforms or a service provided by a commercial vendor. ORCID certifies system integrations built by providers of these scholarly services in our Certified Service Provider or CSP program. This means that with a CSP, users can trust that the ORCID functionality meets community-driven best practices and that service providers themselves can voluntarily demonstrate that they're delivering the ORCID functionalities that their customers expect and require. And we now have 16 widely used systems certified. And in 2024, we included Smart Simple's Smart Simple Cloud, which is a new grant application management system that we've certified for 2024. We also certified 6 new research information systems, including Intembico ORCID Hub, OBD, Omega PSIR, Pure, New Zealand ORCID Hub, and Vidatum Academic. Widespread adoption of persistent identifiers is critical to the success of trustworthy research infrastructure, and it's really important that PIDs work together and support each other to make this happen. Tom mentioned in his section about the work that we did last year to integrate RORs into the user experience so that people can more easily select their affiliations based on their email domains, which has done a tremendous improvement on the amount of affiliations that we have in the registry. But we also provided a financial contribution of $150,000 for the continued growth of ROR, and we're really excited about our continuing partnership with them. And as you can see, we have plans for increasing value to members this year and every year, but I want to highlight a few of them. The first is about improving bulk data access options, which is one of the key differences in the benefits for premium versus basic membership. Now, we currently offer several different mechanisms for bulk access to ORCID data, but they can be difficult to explain, hard to support, and they require the member to do a lot of work on their end to maintain a synced copy of the ORCID data. But modern cloud architectures support, we think, better options for bulk data, such as data streams or analytics-ready data preloaded into a database. And so we are planning improvements and working through those for this year. We're also investigating embedding ORCID profile creation into user provisioning workflows. Many universities have onboarding tools for new students, new faculty, new staff, and by hooking into these workflows, we can allow universities to more easily encourage their users to create ORCID accounts and add validated affiliations. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to Paloma, and she's going to talk about improving global participation.
Thank you very much, Julie. And increasing global participation is actually one of our strategic priorities, as mentioned, but also very important because when we talk to our community, being part of that global community is something that our community really values. In 2024, we were able to continue growing, and we onboarded 2 new consortia, one in Lebanon and one in Nigeria. This was possible thanks to our membership equity program. Also, in terms of new members, we onboarded 112. 82 of them were consortium members and 28 direct members. And the most amazing thing was that we had our first members from Bahamas and Uzbekistan, and also Ecuador as part of the regional Latin American consortium. We continue with our Global Participation Fund, and in fact, in 2024, we granted 11 grants in total, 8 community development and outreach grants going from countries like Uganda, India, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Ghana, Kenya, and Malawi, and also 3 technical integration grants, in this case to further enhance the functionality that is available in this space as a repository system, and also the functionality that is available in Dataverse, in particular the option to log in with ORCID, and also the metadata passed downstream that contain an ORCID ID. Also, the possibility to use, thanks to Knowledge Commons, ORCID better in WordPress platforms. Another important point is that we were able to secure more funds so that this program can run for more years and we can keep supporting our global community. As mentioned by Tom and also by Chris, our community is large and we focus a lot on our work with consortia. In fact, we have the consortium interest group going through the year, but last year we were able to organize our first consortium lead workshop together with the board meeting in Latin America. And this was made possible due to Corporación Cincel, which is also our consortium lead in Chile, and their collaboration with the Data Observatory in Santiago. We also kept working with our community so that we can have a greater ORCID adoption in the Global South. And this was done through different MOUs to establish community of practices in the Arab world, in collaboration with ASREM, in Uganda, in collaboration with RENU, in Sri Lanka, in collaboration with LEARNed, and also in India, in collaboration with InflipNet. In the case of India, this is not only about services to university libraries, but to the entire Indian community, and also to the integration in different systems that support the activities done in research in the country. But we didn't only focus on the Global South, but also on the adoption of ORCID in different communities. 2 that I would like to highlight are the local context, which focus on indigenous communities, indigenous data, sovereignty, and the most important part, the adoption of the CARE principles, collective benefit, authority control, responsibility, and ethics. This goes together with the usage of local context labels so that the research that comes from indigenous communities is also well represented and acknowledged. Together with that, we also started collaborating with GitHub, and now it is possible to, or for developers using GitHub as one of their code libraries, to log in with ORCID and also to correctly connect that code contribution with the ORCID record, thanks to the usage of authentication there. And this was a bit of a summary in terms of global participation in 2024. In 2025, we're going to keep going with those activities, but also we would like to focus on others. In particular, I would like to highlight the work that we plan to do with small organizations, more precisely with small journals, because currently the fee model might not adjust to their needs in terms of fee and also number of publications they have per year. So we would like to offer ORCID better for those small journals. And also in the past 2-3 years, we've developed different materials for 6 main stakeholders. And we would like to adjust those materials also to sub-segments so that everybody can understand clearly the value of ORCID and adapt to their particular needs. And with that, I would like to give the word to Will, who is going to talk about upholding trust and integrity.
Thank you very much, Paloma. Indeed, moving on to the strategic theme of trust and integrity, we're we're really thinking about trust and integrity in ORCID systems and in ORCID, the organization itself. This time last year, we told you that we were going to set up a formal cybersecurity program, and indeed we did that. I'm pleased to say that we've never had a major cybersecurity breach in the history of ORCID, and we certainly want it to stay that way. But in an increasingly hostile environment, we need to stay ahead of that. So we implemented the cybersecurity plan, which will take us through 2026. Although, of course, we'll continue cybersecurity on an ongoing basis after that. The work completed in 2024 included the hiring of a dedicated cybersecurity team, including a fractional consultant CISO and a security engineer in my team. We rolled out comprehensive cybersecurity training for all staff, and we released a new version of the member portal with updated software libraries and improved credential management in the registry and member portal, which is the credentials for when we're accessing backend services such as databases and keeping those secure. We also took another look at our spam detection process. We've enhanced the automation processes there to make sure that records can be identified and locked as quickly as possible. We also improved the algorithm to detect those ORCID records that are not about a person. They're about they're selling a product or service, and we improved the algorithm to detect those and reduce the false positive count. So now we're identifying and locking over 2,200 spam records per week with good accuracy. Now I'm going to hand over to Tommy, who's going to cover some stuff around finance and operations.
Thank you, Will. And on this slide, you see us speaking to our privacy policy. And for the first time since ORCID launched well over a decade ago, we rewrote the privacy policy. Importantly, there were no changes to the underlying practices, the privacy practices disclosed under the prior policy. But to modernize it and update it, we used the current trend, which is clearer presentation of the information about data protection rights, and make it, frankly, more easier to read and much easier to understand. So it's much more digestible. And so that was a great step forward. Related, under ethics and compliance, we published a revised whistleblower policy. And this, in fact, is available on our website for your review. There is a confidential reporting line related to the whistleblower policy that provides members, any stakeholders, the ability to report any concerns without any fear of retaliation, meaning that submissions can be made anonymously at the discretion of the person reporting. And last, we updated our staff code of conduct to make it easier to understand and make sure that we're compliant with some worldwide regulations, as we're in 14 countries around the world, and for example, the equal employment and opportunity regulations that exist in some jurisdictions, and in particular the United States. Moving on to the financial position that Chris had mentioned at the open of the presentation, we had a very strong financial performance in 2024, and the past several years, as indicated in the chart, has been quite supportive of our drive towards long-term financial sustainability. And net assets has grown from 400,000 in 2021 to 4.4 million in 2024. And as a result, we've been able to build reserves. Our reserves are split into 3 segments. The first, importantly, is our global participation fund, largely advanced by the forgiven loans from our original lenders that provided us the funds to start ORCID over a decade ago. The second is 1.6 million in our short-term cash reserves designated by the board for our ongoing operations and need for liquidity. And the last is our long-term capital reserve fund of $3.2 million. And that, of course, sustains us long-term for occasional needs for the business. For example, our rack space to Amazon Web Services conversion that only happened last year under Will's direction. And other needs as they might come along, but only as governed and directed by our board. In the chart, you can see the growth of member revenues, very healthy, leading to our important measure of net operating income, which has grown and includes the projection for 2025. Cash reserves are listed as well as the various segments to reserves that I just mentioned. Will, would you like to speak to the measures for 2025 after this? We've got operating efficiency and transparency for internal policies on the operations side and strengthening our financial resilience with the institutional relationship review. Last year, for the reserves that we've established, we actually moved to Vanguard, which is best in class in terms of investment management. And then this year, we're looking, as many of you know, at a switch in banks, where we have been traditionally with Cap One. We've now moved to PNC Bank, and providing better customer support as well as caretaking of our relationship and our operational requirements. Back to you, Will.
Thanks. Yeah, and on the technical side for next year, we will be implementing the next phase of the cybersecurity program. Lots of good stuff in there across the organization. We're working on a big project at the moment to update a framework we use in the registry for security, Spring Security, to continue keeping our software supply chain free of vulnerabilities and up to date. We're also doing a big project around the administrative tools used by our support team and making sure their admin privileges are used and protected by creating a new admin portal and adding layers of security in there. We're also looking at industry standard user account security in the registry. So this is talking about where users managing their own security. Just an example of that, sometimes you get an email when you signed in from a different location. And we're working with a consultant at the moment to gather requirements around that. And finally, we've already made some progress on this. We're converting heavy API users that exceed the API usage quotas in the public API into ORCID members. The quotas are quite generous, but when you reach those quotas, we're reaching out to organizations and encouraging them to become ORCID members and help us to recover the costs of hosting that public API. So I think that's it from me, and over to Stephanie.
Yeah, thanks so much, Will. And again, thank you everyone for joining us today. So in addition to the 4 strategic pillars we've all been discussing, we have one 5th internally focused strategic pillar that's improving staff experience. We want to make sure that ORCID is a great place to work for our staff. We are a fully remote team. We've been remote since our founding in 2012, and we are small but mighty with 42 staff in 14 different countries. So with that, in 2024, we were working to improve equity across all benefits offered in these different countries. We streamlined our employer of record providers, and we also provided a universal sabbatical leave program for employees. We are lucky to have a number of long-serving employees, and the sabbatical leave program is meant to provide them with a chance to rest and come back to ORCID reinvigorated and excited to serve even longer. In 2024, we also relaunched our professional development program. We want to encourage learning and continuing to build skills across all of our team members. In this picture, you can see our team gathering for our annual staff retreat. This is something we do once a year where we can come together in person and participate in different workshops, hear from members, and spend a week working in person with one another, which is a treat. We also continue to track our internal and external DEI goals. You can see that publicly posted on Trello and shared right here. And in 2025, we're continuing to roll out universal policies and continuing to improve equity across benefits, and continue to improve equity in our benefits offered across different countries. We've just rolled out a universal disciplinary and grievance policy, and we're working to streamline our travel process as well. Since we're fully remote, travel is a significant line item, and we want to make sure we can track and reduce our carbon footprint and ensure safety of staff as they travel throughout the world. Additionally, we are looking to improve our performance management process and tools this year, and we are also starting plans for our annual retreat that will be in Dublin, Ireland later in the year. And as part of my role at ORCID, I also serve as the board secretary, so I'll just give a quick governance update here. In 2025, we're delighted to welcome 4 new board members. We have Lasith Ganawardena from the University of Sri Jayawardenepura out of Sri Lanka, Simon Porter from Digital Science based in the UK, Carly Robertson at the US Department of Energy and based in the US, and Elaine Tam from PLOS based in Singapore. We are continuing to build a global board that reflects our members. Right now, we have 11 countries represented across our 16 board seats. And as a reminder, our board is made up of primarily member representatives with 2 seats held for researcher directors. And for those interested in serving in the board in the future, we'll be opening our call for nominations in May, so please keep an eye out for that. And we are happy to have Lisa Janicki Hinchliff continue to serve as our board chair this year and welcome Steve Pinchotti as our new treasurer. As mentioned at the top of the program, in 2025, the board is quite focused on drafting the next 4-year strategy to cover 2026 through 2029. And with that, I will hand it back to Chris. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. So hope that was interesting. We have got plenty of time for questions, and I see several in the Q&A box. Feel free to continue to type them in if you have things you'd like to know. But Kimberly, where are we going first?
Yes, I think we should go to our most upvoted question. And Tom, I think this one is best suited for you. How is ORCID incorporating the move towards narrative CVs in the funding landscape and how researchers record and present themselves?
Okay, brilliant. Yep, I can answer that. Thanks, Kimberly. Actually, this was part of the inspiration towards that inspired us to do some of the things on our annual plan for researchers this year. Movements such as Quora really push back on the idea of metrics as the only means of measuring impact of researchers. And we believe as a person-centric system, rather than a work-centric system, we're actually really well placed to service the needs of funders or institutions or researchers who'd like to measure their impact in those different ways. So yeah, we're definitely incorporating into what we're doing and our thinking. It's early days this year for us deciding how these things are going to work in practice. But we are definitely taking on board the general direction that we're seeing from funders in particular there. There was a report from DFG, the German funder, about how they've been using what they call hybrid CVs for the last couple of years, which have showed very positive assessments from both the people doing reviews and the people being reviewed. And that's a really interesting approach again. But I will say this, there are lots of different approaches out there. And as a piece of infrastructure, we have to try and support a broad range of ways of measuring impact. But we firmly believe that narrative CVs are a completely reasonable way of doing it. And we also believe that ORCID is well positioned to help with that. So yeah, we're factoring that into our thinking.
Thanks, Tom. Our next question, Chris, I think is best for you. This person is asking that as a journal managing editor, they often need to look up or confirm ORCID records in their articles. But so often records are set to completely private. So one, is that the default setting? And if so, are members aware of that? Is it obvious on how a record holder can make their record public?
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. So this is a really common perception about ORCID, which is why I'd like to clearly set out the actual situation. Partly, I think we know why there's this misunderstanding, and was due to the labeling of records that don't have any public data in them, which we have adjusted, I think, a few months ago. But the situation is that the vast majority of data in ORCID records is public, over 85%. The default setting, privacy setting on every element other than email addresses is public. And honestly, there's not a lot of value in putting data in ORCID records that you keep private, because the whole point is for researchers to really share their profile data. So if you're seeing ORCID records without data on them, the likelihood is they don't have data on them. Now, we're working actively to address that by making it easier for researchers to get data into their ORCID records. Tom talked earlier about the work we're doing, for example, to automatically suggest affiliations to researchers. And we've seen a great uptick as a result in the number of records with affiliation data in them since we released that last year. As Tom also mentioned on the roadmap, we're looking at other ways to make suggestions to researchers and improve automation, so it becomes easier, less overhead for them to maintain their records. But what I would also say is that the more that ORCID data is used, the more likely that researchers are going to be motivated to make sure their records populated. So I would ask, for example, folks who are involved in journals, are you using data on ORCID records when it's available to pre-populate your submission forms? That saves researchers time. They hate entering the same data time after time after time. And it encourages them to make sure that their profile is up to date. Similarly, again, the folks in the journal world, are you making sure that you're collecting ORCID IDs and you've got your submission system hooked up to your publication system and got that hooked up to Crossref, so that when articles are published, they are automatically prompted to be added to ORCID records. We're doing as much as we can to improve automation with the aim of getting ORCID records more populated. And in fact, latest statistics is that only over 80% of ORCID records have at least one work or affiliation in them, which is one of the key metrics we look at. But we would ask all folks who run systems in the scholarly information world to contribute data to ORCID records if you have it. That always happens with the permission of the researcher, but it saves them a lot of time if you can add works or affiliations or funding awards. And similarly, if you need information from researchers, if you need them to populate their profile data in a system, please hook up to the APIs and suck that data in, because it saves an awful lot of time. And the more ORCID is used, the more data is going to flow around the ecosystem to those 6,000 systems that are hooked up to ORCID.
Great, thanks, Chris. Our next question, Tom, I think is best for you. This person is saying that they're curious about the ORCID record customizations mentioned earlier. For example, more control for researchers and how we present ourselves. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of features you're planning to integrate for that purpose?
Yep, definitely. So again, this is in early days. We are actually in the design phase of this at the moment, sort of discovering design. So we're working out, based on prior feedback, what this might look like. We get a huge amount of feedback. We talk to a lot of people. We have a researcher advisory committee, and we also have a very active support desk that feed in all sorts of requests. Plus, our surveys are another source of information here about what people would like to see. Now, we have to balance that. If we let researchers customize ORCID records in any way they like, it can become very confusing for those people that are looking at them, right? So they expect to see things in a certain place. They look at it, it's not there, right? Because the researchers decided for them, in their context, they'd rather have affiliations at the top and works at the bottom, or vice versa, right? So we have to balance out these two different things. We haven't worked out exactly the feature set, but it could include things like selecting your top 5 or top 10 most important works, deciding what is your primary affiliation and elevating that to a different place in the ORCID record. These are the kind of features we're thinking about, and we will be working with the Researcher Advisory Committee again in a couple of months to go through some proposals with them to try and really iron out what is going to be the most valuable thing to do, the biggest bang for a buck, because we have limited resources and we want to do our best with what we've got. So yeah, sorry if that sounds like we don't know yet. We have a good idea, but I don't want to say something and then not deliver it in the future, because it's not going to work out.
Sounds good. So we'll stay tuned to see what happens. Chris, next for you is, what is ORCID's policy regarding retraction of research outputs and outputs coming from paper mills and predatory journals?
Very good question. The short answer is we don't have a policy, in that we are a researcher-controlled system, and we deliberately don't make changes to data on ORCID records. Now, we could surmise that researchers who have a retracted paper might want to remove it from their profile, but that ultimately is up to them. There is one exception, in that we do have a dispute policy. So anybody in the community who thinks there's factually incorrect information on an ORCID record, or somebody's claiming credit for work of somebody else legitimately, you can raise a dispute. We will investigate it, and we will ask the record holder to demonstrate that the data on their record is factually correct. So that would potentially cover some cases, but not specifically, I don't think, paper mills and such like. We are on our list of things to look at, going to take a look at our disputes procedure to see if it needs to be updated and adjusted for some of these new issues around research integrity, and potentially there'll be some adjustments. But the core issue is that ORCID itself doesn't take on the role of adjusting data. I think another thing we might look at in the future is a notification service for researchers to let them know, hey, by the way, your paper has been retracted. Would you like to remove it? Something on our platform to think about.
Sounds good. And somewhat related, earlier someone had asked about, if I discover spam or spam user, how can we report these to ORCID? And Paloma shared a really helpful link to our support team, so you can get in contact, and that's under the answered tab in the Q&A box. So check that out if that's something you encounter. This next question, I believe, has to do with fees and membership. Is there a plan to reduce the platinum subscription in the coming years?
I guess that's one for me as well. We don't have a platinum subscription. I assume that what the questioner is referring to is our premium membership option. We constantly keep our fees under review, and the goal is, for a non-profit, is to generate enough information, enough money to sustain our work, and a reasonable surplus so that we can maintain our sustainability as an organization, but no more. We have made a number of adjustments to our fee model in the past couple of years. We introduced what we call membership equity pricing, which offers discounts for members in countries with lower income economies, which wasn't in place before. And we've also introduced some tiering into our consortia pricing, so that there's an element of larger organizations paying more, principally to enable us to reduce fees for smaller organizations. So I wouldn't say we specifically have a plan to reduce a particular fee. You know, if you have concerns about affordability, please, and if you're a member, please reach out to your engagement contact, and we're happy to take that feedback. We have a membership and fees committee, which is a committee of our board. It also has external members on it, and all of our fees are essentially reviewed and set by that committee. We will be, as Stephanie said, we've got board elections coming up. Shortly after that, we'll also be looking for external members to join those committees. So if you're interested in helping us think any changes to our fee model through, then please do let us know.
Thanks, Chris. Our next question, Tom, I think is for you. Firstly, this person is happy for the addition of arts and humanities related outputs to ORCID, and they would love to hear about what plans are for continuing to increase diversity of contributions and roles of researchers over the next few years.
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly, and apologies, Giovanna. I typed an answer and it moved to answered, so I thought maybe I could talk about a little bit about this. Now, again, with my Weasley product hat on it, I can't promise when any of these things will come, but we do know that things like teaching and supervision of students are two categories of activity that researchers are very interested in being able to showcase on ORCID records, and they're increasingly becoming part of assessments as well. So that is something that we know that we don't quite represent correctly at the moment, that we'd like to rectify in the future. I don't know when we're going to be able to do that. I don't think we'll be able to get to it this year, but it definitely is something that we're thinking about, and hopefully we can get to next year. And there's all sorts of other things around the context, around particular works, societal impact, these kind of things. Hopefully, as we work through our work this year, will put us in really good stead to try and support them a bit better in the years to come.
Thanks, Tom. I think we have time for one last question, and Paloma, I think you'd be great to answer this. Does ORCID have any integrations with tools such as Altmetric Explorer?
Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you for the question. So to our knowledge, it is possible to retrieve outputs using an ORCID ID in Altmetric Explorer, but there is no bilateral integration. However, if you have further questions about any other kind of tools and integrations, you can definitely reach out to us and to the team, and we will be more than happy to answer.
Thanks, Paloma. So we weren't able to get to quite to all of our questions, but I'll share these unanswered questions with the senior team, and we will answer them and share them in the follow-up materials. Chris, is there anything you'd like to say before we sign off today?
Well, just to thank everybody for attending. Looks like we had great attendance for this webinar. And, you know, our work is only possible through the support of our member organizations and the researchers who use our services. So thank you for your participation, for your interest in ORCID. I'll just remind you that if you want to learn more about anything we've talked about in the webinar, please do download and read our annual report, which fleshes out a lot of what we've talked about today in more detail. And thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone, thanks for your questions too.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you all.